Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Attleboro Land Trust live series on Facebook, all about land conservation and protection in the city of Attleboro. My name is Evan Foster, and I'm the TerraCore member for the ALT. My work has focused on land stewardship and community engagement. I'm hoping that through these live series, along with my other work, I will help the Attleboro community connect with the ALT's protected natural areas and encourage you all to get outside and get involved with this amazing work. I'm very excited to have our first guest for the series, Roy Belcher. So Roy joined the Land Trust in 2010, shortly after his retirement from a business career. He has served on the Finance, Property, and Development committees and has held the offices of Treasurer and President of the Board of Directors. One of his special interests is ensuring the long-term sustainability of the Land Trust, which might someday include professional staff. One of Roy's most memorable projects has been the acquisition of the Deborah and Roger Richardson Preserve and holding a community-wide opening celebration. Today, Roy is going to talk about the history of the ALT, the importance of open space in the city, and how you can get involved with this work. If you have any questions for Roy during the presentation, please type them in the comment section and I will read them out at the end. So with that, Roy, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, well, I am delighted to be able to reach a larger audience, and I'm so glad I have the chance to talk about the land trust here in Attleboro. Now, recently in the news, the governor has signed a magnificent climate change bill, which is aimed at getting the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be carbon neutral by the year 2050. So that's mapping out massive changes to our environment over the next 3 decades. And I'm all for it. However, I want to talk about what is happening right here today in Attleboro and how people can get involved without having to change their whole lifestyle. So the Land Trust was formed by a few citizens 31 years ago. People got together. They were concerned about the loss of open space. There was a large tract of land that was proposed to be turned into, 70 house lots instead of nice forest. So they got together and they formed the Land Trust. And they began to solicit donations of land and were successful in acquiring some very nice property with hiking trails, some creeks and streams, really nice wildlife habitat here in Attleboro. And that is the nature of our organization today. It's been 31 years, but it's still an all-volunteer organization. It's made up of concerned citizens who want to do their part in maintaining our local environment. And it's so important to think locally. When I think about the statewide efforts to address climate change, they're a little bit overwhelming. But I can go out and actually beautify the land close to where I live on a Saturday, either as a part of a committee or just on my own. So the Land Trust has as its mission to preserve open space and wildlife habitat. So some of our property is open with hiking trails and amenities, and some is really not accessible. It's mainly space for animals to survive in the wild. And unfortunately, as development increases, and it has been very active in the last few years, that wildlife habitat is shrunk. Sometimes it's cut in half and made into small islands that are no longer large enough to support the wildlife who live there. So we would like to maintain a balance between development and open space, and would like to see a certain amount of open space preserved in every part of the city, so that it's not paved over, if you will. So how do we go about that? Well, as I said, we're an all-volunteer organization, so we encourage our local citizens to get involved. And how do they do that? Well, first off, they need to know about the land trust. So we have a website, and it's attleborolandtrust.org. And on that website, which we're pretty proud of, there is a description of the organization. There's a calendar of upcoming events. There are trail maps of the properties that we have trails on. And there are opportunities for people to register their abilities if they would like to volunteer. So we have some people who would like to volunteer doing outdoor work, but some people would rather do like help us with our mailings or help us with administrative stuff. We have a small office at Oak Knoll near Briggs Corner in the Mass Audubon facility. And so we've had volunteers who said, yeah, I could work in your little office, 2 hours a month or whatever it is. We have volunteers who check our mailbox and volunteers who keep a database. And incidentally, if you would like to be a volunteer, you can sign up on our website and indicate what areas you might be interested in volunteering. If you're really interested and you want to become a member, you can also do that by going to our website. And we have a membership fee of $25 a year per individual, or $50 a year for a household. And those donations help us to maintain our property. And there's a little bit of overhead. The land trust does have liability insurance. And so we have some protection if someone is injured on land trust property. Different committees oversee the operation of the land trust. So the most prominent committee is the Property Maintenance Committee, which volunteers serve to clean up and then repair when needed the parking lots at various properties. Sometimes we have volunteers who say, oh, there's a tree down across the trail. So they'll get out there with chainsaws and open up the trail again. We also maintain the community garden in downtown Attleboro, and volunteers are very active there, opening up in the spring, keeping it clean, and maintaining the planting beds, and then the close up in the fall. Another committee that we have is land acquisition, and that committee attempts to locate property that would be of a high value for conservation. And the land acquisition committee would then contact the landowners and see if they are at all interested in donating it, or perhaps donating a conservation restriction. Conservation restriction protects the property from further development into the future, but it doesn't necessarily transfer ownership to anyone else. Now we have a development committee that does fundraising and also keeps our membership informed of the projects that we're working on. And we have an education and outreach committee, which is also very active. We work with high school students. We work with some elementary students as well. And we try to keep the general public informed about the projects that we've been working on. So volunteers could decide that they would like to serve on any of those committees and help keep the land trust active. I mentioned, Evan mentioned in his opening introduction that one of the things I enjoyed most was working on the grand opening of the Richardson property. That was a 5-year negotiation to acquire that property, and included quite a bit of fundraising because the donors could not see their way clear to donating property that was worth, I don't know, $1.5 million. They wanted to get a little bit of remuneration out of that. So we actually did a bargain sale, and we raised money with some serious fundraising efforts in order to make them whole. So once we had acquired that property, we had a huge celebration. We probably had, I don't know, a couple hundred citizens show up to help celebrate the fact that we had opened it up. And that was 5 years ago. Now, this year, we just completed the parking lot there. So we have an 8-car parking lot that has been well designed and should last us many years. Other projects that we have going on are at the Larson Woodland. We are doing a invasive plant removal project. We get rid of the invasive plants that aren't native to our area and replace or reforest with native trees. And this helps the ecology in that particular area. In the Handy Street property, which is actually owned by the city, the Land Trust is active there in maintaining the trails and monitoring that conservation restriction. The conservation restriction on that particular property precludes motorized vehicles. However, when we walk through the property, we can see quite a bit of evidence that motorized vehicles have been doing some damage to the trails. So one of our prospective activities would be to mark all the trailheads with a sign that says motorized vehicles aren't allowed here. And probably the most prominent activity of the Land Trust in the last couple of years has been the Hike Attleboro project. At our annual meeting 3 years ago, we had a guest speaker who had invented a hiking trail network in his town. He had found a way to link together all the hiking trails into a kind of a green necklace, if you will. And so we decided to try that here in Attleboro. And we've started putting up some signs indicating where the trails are. And now we're at the point where we have a couple of people mapping all the trails, all the walkable trails in Attleboro, so that we can begin to try to link them together. It's a massive project. It'll probably be a few years before we actually get some of these trails connected, but it's very satisfying to see the work begin. So that's it in a nutshell. Evan, are there other areas that you think I could touch on?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much, Roy. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the city, Mass Audubon, and the ALT. I know that there's pretty close ties there, and they've helped everyone's helped each other a lot with, increasing open space in Attleboro. I'm wondering if you could talk about that.
Sure. As most people may know, Mass Audubon is a much older, well-established statewide organization. They have quite a few professional staff. So when the Land Trust got started, we got some very helpful consultation from Mass Audubon. And one of the land acquisition specialists who worked there suggested that we partner with Mass Audubon and the city to acquire a large portion of the La Salette land. And there were existing hiking trails through it, but there was no formal agreement that the property was open to hiking. So that three-way partnership went into negotiation, and there was some fundraising involved to acquire that property. But at the end of the day, the city, Mass Audubon, and the Land Trust pulled this deal together. Actually, at the beginning, it was simply a conservation restriction, and La Salette continued to own the land. At some point, they decided to actually donate the land to Mass Audubon, and the city and the Land Trust both hold the conservation restriction. And that means that we're responsible for making sure that the deeded restrictions on the property are observed and that there are no encroachments. So once a year, we monitor that to make sure that the conservation restriction is being honored. So after that successful three-way deal, a few years later, the city said, hey, we have an opportunity to acquire the Handy Street property. There's a state grant that we could apply for, which would pay for most of it, but they require matching funds. So they asked if Mass Audubon and the Land Trust would go to work to raise the matching funds, which we did. And the Land Trust was able to bring in $50,000 as our contribution to the matching funds. And I don't know how much Mass Audubon contributed, but I'm sure it was substantial. So it was another three-way deal. This time the city owns the land, and Mass Audubon and the Land Trust both own the conservation restriction. And it's a beautiful, I think it's 84 acres, loads of trails, lots of different geological features. It's got a creek running through it, so there's running water, and it's quite beautiful. And then the third example was the most recent. That was the acquisition of the Deborah and Roger Richardson Nature Preserve that I enjoyed so much. And in that three-way deal, the Land Trust is the owner of the property, and the city and Mass Audubon each hold the conservation restriction on it. And that property is 63 acres, and it's, I would say, the most engaging piece of property that the Land Trust actually owns and maintains. So that three-way deal has worked out very well, and we have a very cordial and effective relationship with both Mass Audubon and the city.
That's great. Yeah, all those properties are beautiful and always nice to get out to them. Yeah, so I'm wondering about open space. So you talked a little bit about it. I'm wondering if you could talk about the best ways for people to stay engaged about increasing open space in the city. Would that be kind of joining the ALT? Would that be kind of pushing the city to really acquire this land and create these recreational places? Yeah.
Sure. One comment that I hear frequently from concerned citizens is they see forest upland being cut down for development, and they see houses going up where there used to be walking trails and wildlife habitat. And we understand that when land is owned by private individuals and they have been paying tax on it for years, they would like to get their money back by selling it as a house lot. On the other hand, it's very important to us to maintain a balance. And so there are several ways that the general public can express their desire to keep open space. The city has an open space plan, and in that plan, there are usually directions for sensitive areas that would be advantageous to maintain as open space. Our elected officials need to hear from the citizen public that we're interested in maintaining that open space. In some towns and communities, including Attleboro, the public has gotten behind the public officials to spend tax money that they've collected to buy that property in order that it be preserved. And of course, in Attleboro, the acquisition of Highland Park, the former Highland Country Club golf course, was a major effort to maintain some open space instead of seeing it built up in houses. And I believe that cost about $3 million that came out of the city coffers. And then there's one other thing that I would hope people would do, and that is when they talk to people who have land that would be important to preserve, that they speak up and say, gee, if you need to get some money out of this piece of land, can you carve out some for conservation? If you have 5 acres, could you sell 2 house lots and donate 3 acres? So that sort of thing is helpful. It's really a matter of persuading people that land preservation is a priority.
Great. Yeah, no, that is all very, very important. I think tying in with that, I'm wondering if you could just talk about, you kind of just mentioned it, but why we need these open spaces and what the benefits are. Because I know obviously the conservation and preservation part, but some of these are, parks and stuff for people to go out and enjoy and be outside. So if you could talk about that.
Well, one of our recent strategies is, instead of waiting for sympathetic landowners to contact us, we have targeted open space that has high conservation value. For example, adjacent to the Richardson property, there is some privately owned land that is currently a wildlife corridor. I think it's a corridor for deer, possibly coyotes, and a large number of different birds. So preserving contiguous parcels to have a wildlife corridor is a strategy that we promote. We don't turn down small parcels because they're not contiguous, but we would definitely like to see larger tracts rather than little islands around the city. And there's something else that I always like to mention. When people of my age start thinking about their estate plans, they don't necessarily have to donate conservation land. If they want to put a financial bequest to the land trust in their will, that money can be squirreled away to purchase land at a future date. Or if somebody wants to donate commercial land or residential, a home, the land trust can convert that to funds have built up a nest egg of funding that they can use to purchase land by accepting a gift of somebody's house or investments. So we would encourage everybody, if you're getting to be my age and you're thinking about your estate plan, you can put some or all of the residual amount into a gift to the land trust.
Yeah, that's great. Landowners are definitely, and anyone donating money and all that, very important. Just like the volunteers too. I'm wondering if you could talk about if people don't have much experience, say with land trust or conservation work, what types of opportunities or kind of trainings does the land trust supply so that people can kind of learn the ropes and get a little more comfortable with it? Because we obviously want any experience level. It's not just people that have tons of experience in this field. We really want everyone to come out and experience it and learn about these really cool topics.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because there is a lot to learn. I was attracted into the land trust because I like being outdoors. I like hiking, and I saw my future as being sort of like trail maintenance. I had a chainsaw. I could do that sort of outdoor stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I never imagined that I would be reviewing a conservation restriction or entering memberships into a database or trying to invest funds so that they would be available to purchase conservation land. So my introduction to this is probably similar to a lot of people. I was invited to a trail work day and invited to bring leather gloves, some clippers, and my chainsaw. And I was with a bunch of other, mostly guys, and we were, cutting fallen trees and so forth. And I was being cautioned to observe all the safety considerations when using a chainsaw. Later on, one of the more experienced members pointed out the invasive species that were encroaching on that particular property. And so I got involved, not too directly, but I was involved with a committee that was strategizing on removing the invasives. And later on, we had another work day where about 40 people showed up, and there were 3 different invasive species on this one property. So one group was pulling out the bittersweet vines, which if people aren't aware of what they do, they climb up to the top of the tree, leaf out, and eventually they'll kill the tree. And their berries, as we were cutting these vines out, we were trying to keep the berries from reseeding. We could rip out the vines, but the seeds would make them grow back. So I learned a little bit just from working with other people who had more experience about removing invasive species. And then later on, another person said, well, it doesn't do any good just to get rid of the invasives. You have to plant the native plants and get them started. Otherwise, birds will reseed the bittersweet or the other invasive species. So then I got involved going to the nursery, picking up some native trees, very small, and planting them out there. And then they have to be watered and cared for until they take hold. So that's an example of some of the basic stuff. I have attended many of the property committee meetings, and that's another learning experience because we find out that maintaining our properties can include a lot of things that people don't usually think of. Finding the boundary markers, for example. One of the members pulls out a survey map that has the diagram that shows where the boundary line is. Dealing with homeowners who have a problem with maybe a tree on land trust property is overhanging their driveway, and they say, gee, I'm worried that tree is going to fall on my car. What can you guys do about it? And so we developed a policy for dealing with healthy trees or unhealthy trees. So I don't know if I could describe any better how the learning curve works, I think it's mostly one-on-one experience with other volunteers.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important also, you don't have to have a ton of time to do this. You can really just spend like an hour or so on a weekend, just devoting a little bit of time to, help out the land trust, but also to learn new skills and meet other people. Sometimes hard during the pandemic, but we're getting the vaccines out and that. So hopefully we'll have some more of those kind of work parties and able to interact and learn from one another. Yeah. So I think I'm going to ask you one more question, and I think you have already kind of talked about it, and we've probably said it a lot, but I'm wondering if you could just reiterate the importance of volunteers for the Land Trust and really just tell how much they mean to the Land Trust and how much they lead to the success of the Land Trust.
Yes. As I mentioned, we're an all-volunteer organization, and somebody at the church that I belong to is fond of saying, 10% of the people do 90% of the work. And the same kind of situation at times applies to the Land Trust. We have a few very dedicated volunteers who are deeply committed, and they're not going to let things slide. However, it's very easy. If people go to the website and sign up as a volunteer, it doesn't cost anything. They can get an email that's, and the email could be tailored. If they're only interested in doing office work, they're not going to get all the emails about, we're going to be cleaning up the parking lot or we're going to be doing trail work. They're only going to get an email saying there's some office work that needs to be done. Could you help us out on such and such a date? And I like to refer to it as a limited commitment opportunity. You don't have to make a financial contribution if you don't want to. You don't have to show up every time there's a parking lot cleanup or we're picking up litter on the trails. You only have to show up when you've got the time and you want to get outdoors.
Great. So we actually just had a question come in from Derek, who says, speaking of volunteering, would the trust have need for a licensed drone pilot for some aerial imagery of some of the properties? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Roy.
We probably do. I know that other land trusts have used drones to monitor their properties, and we don't have a formal program, probably because we didn't have a drone operator. So I would urge that person to send us an email so we have your contact information, and we'll see where this fits into our monitoring our boundaries.
Yeah, that's great. And I see Bill is telling me to mention that there is a work party tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the Deborah and Roger Richardson Nature Preserve, and I believe it's some invasive species removal. So that's a great opportunity to get outside and do some work.
It's going to be
what was that?
It's going to be a very nice day tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. There you go. Nice day to be outside. And I did put the email address for the Land Trust in the chat. So Derek, feel free to send an email to that. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Roy, before I close up?
I guess it's that old saying, think globally, act locally. And the Land Trust is your local environmental organization. Please support it.
Good. Nice. Great. Well, yeah. So thanks so much to Roy and for all of you for joining. I also just want to let everyone know that the ALT is also hosting a series of events/activities for Earth Week, which is April 19th to the 23rd. And this is also April vacation for the schools. And it's a great opportunity to get outside, spend some time with your family, and to do some kind of kid-oriented activities. There'll be some scavenger hunts, some nature art events, and some tree ID events. And you can find those events either on our Facebook page or our website. And you can register through that, or you can send me an email, which is evanfosteralt@gmail.com. And I can put that in the chat. But we would love to see you all there. And yeah, and we'll have another episode next week on Friday at noon, so the same time. So look out for that. All right, thank you, Roy, and thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate it.
Evan.
Yep, take care.